Welcome to Krome Cast. Check it out. I'm Sam Major, Commercial Director of Krome Technologies. On this week's edition, we'll talk to John Ledner, pre-sales consultant, about the features and benefits of using a direct routing model for calling on Microsoft Teams. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
Well, this is obviously a very relevant topic right now, given the effects of the pandemic and having pushed many organisations, including our own, to adopt this fully remote or hybrid working model. The adoption of such tools as Teams. It surged over the past 12 to 18 months. And I was reading an article, and Microsoft were quoted as saying they've grown from 20 million active users kind of pre-pandemic to 115 million active users, and that was as of October last year. That's, what is that, 600, nearly best part of 600% increase. Now that would have grown since then. That's last October, so we're probably past 600% growth by now. And many businesses, as we know, adopted Teams initially to utilise the video conferencing element and collaboration capabilities of that tool or other tools like it. And now we're seeing many businesses, again, including our own, that are now utilising Teams for inbound and outbound calling as well. So I guess first question for our audience, if you could explain what the options are for using Microsoft Teams for business calls.
Okay, so first of all, Sam, you're very right. We've seen this massive increase in the last 12 to 18 months of organisations taking Teams. But what you're seeing is organisations using Teams, as you say, for conferencing, meetings, internal communications in whatever shape or form. But the telephony side of it, they're still using the traditional systems. And so you're seeing all sorts of setups where people are having people still in offices diverting calls to mobiles, paying recurring fees for phone systems, but at the same time they're using Teams. So what Microsoft has now done is they've incorporated telephony functions into Teams that allows you to quite literally make and receive phone calls through the Teams platform, just like you would with a traditional phone on the desk. But what's interesting though, Sam, is, as I was saying, we're seeing these organisations that have adopted Teams for one part of the business, but not for the telephony part of the business, because there's a lack of information out there and they're unable to make an informed decision as to how best to progress with it. So they're not progressing at all.
Okay. So I guess how do we help them unblock that? People that aren't progressing, clearly there's some benefits here of utilising something you're already investing in. You're mentioning there's people using different platforms, right? So people have what we know traditional kind of PBX telephony versus Teams, and so they're not making any progress at all. How do we break that? How do we help people move forward and adopt Teams more fully? And I guess two-part question. I'll do this to everyone just to confuse them. What are the pitfalls of that?
Okay, so I think the first thing is education of organisations to say, look, you've got Teams and this is what it can potentially do, and sitting down and having conversations with them. Some organisations are doing a bit of research into it for themselves, and they're going off down because there's two roads you can go when you're looking at Teams and telephony. You can either go down, which is usually the worst idea, the road of the least resistance, or you can do the road where you've got to do a bit of research and a bit of homework. So what you could do, for example, is if you're already a Teams user, you could just log on to your Microsoft account and you could just click the button that says Microsoft route my calls for me. Now, this is not necessarily the best way to go because, as I'm sure we'll discuss, it's not the best financial move, and also it only gives you real basic functionality. So what a lot of other companies, a lot of organisations are starting to do now is they're starting to use the telephony function of Teams, that front end telephony. But in the back end, what they're doing is they're programming it to route the calls through a preferred network. And this is what is known in the industry as direct routing. So by using that direct routing function, what you're doing is you're still keeping that front end Teams, that front end that everyone is familiar with. But when you make a phone call, that phone call is then routed through your preferred supplier. And not only is it routed through a preferred supplier, but you've also got a lot of increased functionality about how those calls are routed, who they're routed with. And also you've got increased functionality when those calls are coming in. There's a lot more you can control through that side of it as well.
Okay, so just talk on functionality there. Is that things like simple things like DDIs, for instance?
Yeah. So what we're seeing is when it comes down to the direct routing option, where you're not giving those calls to Microsoft, you're actually routing them through your own preferred supplier. What we're finding with that is that's definitely the thing that's being adopted by the medium to larger organisations, the sorts of organisations that need the control, they need the flexibility, but at the same time, they need to be routing through certified Microsoft partners. So that's the freedom that direct routing gives them, and by doing that, they can remove that concern about the Microsoft pre-plans, and it gives them, as I say, it gives them a lot more control over what they're doing. So that's preferred, as I say, by the larger organisations. They may have a large head count, a lot of employees. They may have a lot of remote workers, or there might be businesses that are making a lot of outbound phone calls or need additional functionality like you would see in a more traditional type phone system.
Understood. So I guess when you're setting up Teams, you look at you could take the Microsoft plan, and like you said, that's the path to least resistance, as it were. But there seems to be some pitfalls there. So again, we talk about this on the podcast a lot. Proper planning and execution to make sure you get a better result. You could go, I guess, path of least resistance. Does it save money? I guess people looking at the Microsoft calling plan. It's easier to set up, but versus a direct routing model. Is there a cost benefit? Is that why people lean that way, or is it simply because it's simpler and actually this direct routing model, I guess, is it commercially better as well?
Sam, this is really one of the most important things that whenever you're considering this move, this is one of the key conversations you want to sit down and talk about. So we obviously, I talk to a lot of clients about this, and they say to me, John, what can I expect to happen? So for example, if you were to go down the Microsoft route and say to Microsoft, please route my calls. So what they'll say is, right, okay, that's fine. It's done in a very much per user, per month license. So what we'll give you...
The standard licensing platforms and so on, so it kind of dovetails into all of that.
Exactly that. It's per user, per month. And what they'll say is, right, what we'll do is we will give you the ability to make phone calls, and we'll give you 1,200 minutes a month. So this is all very familiar to us. We've all got mobile phone contracts or house phone contracts, and it sounds very easy to consume. So yeah, that will do us. But you need to take that apart, and you need to say, right, well, how does that fit my business? Yep. So let's look at 1,200 minutes. Well, what's 22 days in the average month working?
Days, that's fair, yeah.
Yeah, so it works out about 50 minutes. How much time? So let's say, for example, you're a contact centre and you're making outbound phone calls, and you're employing loads and loads of people to make loads and loads of outbound phone calls. Well, how pleased would the sales director be if the average person was spending about 50 minutes on the phone a day? You wouldn't be too happy, would you? So you need to think of things like that. So what we did is we did a really an interesting thing where we put some figures into a spreadsheet. And we created a call centre and said, right, okay, here's a contact centre, 200 members of staff. Let's put them on the Microsoft plan, and let's get them making outbound calls, and let's get them making calls just slightly over the allowed amount every single day. And let's have a look and see what that looked like.
This is quite interesting. Go
on. Well, the interesting thing, what we did was we did it by a minute or so, and the phone bill for that make-believe call centre was about $4,000. But what was interesting, Sam, is what we then did is we said, right, okay, well, let's up their productivity by 10 minutes a day. You know, not a great deal. So you're not making 50 minutes.
Again, if you've got the sales director and he's got an outbound call centre and they're only achieving an hour's activity a day, I guess he's still going to be pretty unamused. But let's go with that.
You wouldn't be happy, would you? But what we did is we turned the dial up, and we said instead of it being 50 minutes, we made it an hour.
Yeah.
And the phone bill went from, and this is routing through Microsoft, the phone bill went from roughly £4,000 per month to £9,500 a month.
Okay, you can see where that goes. Now you've done a bit of work in this space, I know you have, but the average contact centre, they're all behind dialers and whatever else, and and the guys are on the phone all day, so that could easily be 18, 36 into £60,000 a month.
Yeah, but what's also really, really interesting, Sam, is the way the Microsoft policy is set out, the way the plan is set out. So what they do is they say, okay, as just back up a second, I was saying this 1,200 minutes thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
But what they then say is, right, okay, so you and I, when we make a phone call with our mobile and we go over the amount of minutes, what actually happens for you and I is we get our phone bill comes through at the end of the month, and there's your normal amount plus another 50 pence or whatever it is for the additional phone calls you made. Well, what Microsoft's done is they're using, and this is a very important thing, they're using something called a communications credit. So what you do is you buy your 1,200 minutes for all of your people, but then you buy, for want of a better term, a bit like a bond, where you've got this amount of money sat in a pot with Microsoft. And what you're basically saying is, Microsoft, if I go over my minutes, start taking money out of that pot.
Okay.
So, right, I can see you thinking. Yeah, and what you're thinking is bill shock, because what you one of your sales directors says, let's do a campaign, let's do this, let's do that. And at the end of the month, you suddenly discover that your pot is almost empty. Or even worse, you empty the pot halfway through the month.
Yeah.
Now you can't make any outbound phone calls, and someone's trying to get a hold of the FD to fill the pot back up. Okay. So it's a sort of half pay monthly, half pay as you go kind of setup. It's very confusing, and it's stuff like this that's confusing business leaders as to what to do with routing through Teams. Yeah, I'll just say something. With the direct routing function, the way that direct routing is built is traditional. You pay this much to rent the service, and if you go over, you just get a bit more of a bill at the end of the month, and that's the way it should be done.
Okay, so if someone has ignored all of this advice and they've signed up directly to a Microsoft calling plan, and then they've watched this and they've thank you, John, amazing, you're going to save us lots of money, brilliant, and then we need to move them to a direct a routed model. I guess how do we do that? What options are there?
It's really, it's so simple to do. So if, for example, you are, let's say, Joe Smith and Co, they've signed to Microsoft, and they are looking at it and they think, right, okay, we've probably not made the right move here. And they want to look at the whole direct routing thing. It's, do you know what? Half the work's done. They've got Teams. They've got because the phone system is a bolt-on within Teams. So you've got Teams, you've got the phone system bolt-on, and everyone's familiar with using it. As far as moving to direct routing is concerned, it's really, really simple. So for a small organisation, you would quite literally speak to your provider and you'd say, I want to look at direct routing. And without getting too technical about it, Sam, it's pretty simple stuff. You order the service, you order the license, and then you basically push that config into Teams via PowerShell. Yep. And so that's now got your outbound. And then what you do is what we call the losing provider, the company that you're taking the telephony service from, you just transfer the phone numbers from those guys onto your platform. And that's how you would move somebody from an existing team setup. But obviously, if you are completely new to it and you're saying, I want to go from the ground up and I want to start from scratch. Yes, so you're going to need a Microsoft Office 365 license that includes Teams, and you're going to need, as I say, you're going to need that bolt-on, that phone system bolt-on. Obviously, you need an internet connection. Obviously, yeah. But so
we
that,
might have one of those, I think. But we'll be able to
yeah, it would be like having a car without a steering wheel, wouldn't it? So, so that gives you the foundations of setting it up, okay? And then what you can do is you can then look at what direction to go in once you've got Teams set up and Teams has got the ability to make a phone call. And there are two ways of doing this. If you are a simple business that has a simple requirement, pick the phone up, make a phone call and stuff like that, then we would set it up as a simple direct routing where we would license each individual user to just make and receive outbound calls. However, if you're a larger organisation that has multiple offices or multiple user types, and what I mean by multiple user types, you might have 80% of your staff might be sat in an office using PCs and Teams and stuff like that, but you then might have a mobile workforce, you might have a factory workforce with analog phones bolted to the walls and stuff like that. You might have multiple offices that all want to dial through one system. So if we were to go down that road, that would be a bit more complicated and would involve additional hardware and software. We'd look at a device called a session border controller.
Okay.
And the best way to describe that is it's like a gateway, and all of the users and all of the equipment all goes through this gateway, the session border controller, and the session border controller then connects out to that traditional phone network. But what it's doing is it's acting as a go-between, a middleman to route all that stuff out onto the to the public network. So that is how you would do the simple setup of it. But what's really important, Sam, and I can't stress this one enough, it's plan your solution. Take the correct advice, because what you don't want to be doing is you don't want to be going down that thinking, oh yeah, we just make and receive phone calls, and you go down the rabbit hole, and then you realise, oh, hang on a second, we've got this requirement, we've got that requirement, we've got that requirement, and then you end up having to back up and start again. So it's very important in the early stages to take the correct advice and say, do I go off on this direction where I just do a basic?
Well, this is where, and I'm telling you, like, you don't actually work for Krome, obviously you do, so you know all this, but this is why we do RDWs, right? That's why we take the time to sit with the customer and do the, where are you now, where do you want to be, understand all the pitfalls in between, and actually, do that project plan before we move forwards. Because if we define what success looks like before we move, we should take the right steps to get there. Like you say, we've seen many a project historically where people have kind of wanted to do something, have run at it, and have gone past the stage gate without thinking about it. And like you say, you've got to unpick that. Unfortunately, the only way to do that is to kind of go back and start again. And you've lost that time, you've lost that money, and you're no further forward. You just got more problems.
And you'll never get it back.
No, absolutely. But doing that RDW, defining what the success criteria and the outputs need to be, that will ultimately shape the size and shape of the project that we have to undertake to get someone there. So I'm with you. Everything we do at Krome is that kind of factual, sort it out at the beginning type thing and do it once. It's measure twice, cut once type thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Even in DIY, that doesn't apply to my DIY. It very much does apply to this. I'm with you, and it's all about that proper planning. Okay, so just I think out loud actually on a couple of points you said. How do we manage? And this is kind of depends you're talking about it, but you've mentioned mobiles. Now I can see how a mobile connected to an internet connection we could use Teams and so on to call on. Mm-hmm. How do you manage that with your providers? So you still need a telephony, a kind of mobile plan provider for mobile phones and so on. And then how do your session border controller, is that taking care of the kind of analog phones you still have? How do we manage those different requirements there?
So the session border controller is for a telephony geek like me, is a really interesting bit of kit. I'll try not to be too nerdy and geeky about it.
No, go for it.
It's a fantastic gadget where what you can do is you can get old world and new world and bring them together. And what you'll also find is when it comes down to the per user, per license, per user, per month model, as you start scaling up and up and up, it no longer becomes financially viable. And what I mean is, let's say, hypothetically, you've got 10 users and it's £10 a month. So fine, it's 100 quid. But
I can do that, John. I had to know.
I had to stop and think about it. Did you see that? But then when you start scaling that up to 1,000 people, you then step back and retort to me. You think, crikey, what am I spending here? So what the session border controller allows you to do, first of all, is get a large population of staff and route them through one device. And how it actually works, instead of having an individual phone license, as it were, for each user, what you do is all those users go into the session border controller, and that session border controller then connects to the telephone network using SIP trunks. So SIP trunks are basically internet phone lines. The best way to describe them, it's just like a normal phone line, but it routes over the internet. And they're measured with the amount of phone lines, and you can have direct DDIs on them and all that sort of stuff. So what you might have is a model where you've got 1,000 staff. The 1,000 staff need to be able to make a phone call, but those 1,000 staff don't actually make that many phone calls. So what you don't want is 1,000 licenses that only 10 of them get used a day. What you want is 1,000 users connecting to a session border controller, and that session border controller then has 20 SIP trunks connected to it.
Okay. So this is a bit like, just to put it into my terms and kind of my background, but you're looking at concurrent user licensing. So we have this many people, but we know on any given time, 20% of our client base would actually be proactively making an outbound call. In my world, actually 20 people would be accessing the system, but I have 200 people that could. But the chance of all 200 people accessing it is never going to happen because of shift work and so on and so forth, right? So I'm assuming in this case, that's what the SIP trunk is allowing you to do. You're taking, we could potentially, have 1,000 people, let's say, but we know because of shift work and the way people work and whatnot, they're never all be doing it at the same time. So we can take a bet that, and I'm assuming we have tools where we can measure this as well, John, that only this amount of people ever kind of jump on at the same time, building some headroom, and then monitor to make sure we're inside the headroom.
Exactly that. And what you can also do with that, Sam, is you can flex. So say, for example, you're a seasonal business, you can just say, right, okay, well, for 11 months of the year, we only need this amount, but for 1 month, we need to flex up, and you can just flex it and bring it up and bring it down. So that's one of the fantastic things about the session border controller. But and I'll give you another example where you'll have, say, for example, a university or a large school or something like that. And what you'll find with an organisation like that is they've got, as I was saying earlier, you've got that 80% workforce modern, 20% workforce analog. Well, what the session border controller allows you to do is, let's say hypothetically, it's a school and you've got all of the office area, but then you've got like a catering team, you've got a maintenance team, and then you've got some classrooms that need analog phones for whatever. So what the session border controller will allow you to do is get the whole team's environment and connect that, but get those literally old telephone extensions, that old 20-year-old telephone extension in the kitchen, you can put it on Teams. And somebody in the office can ring extension 1, 2, 3, 4 and speak to the kitchen through an analog phone that's been bolted to the wall before Teams was invented.
I'll be honest with you, John, and I'm around this all the time. It's clearly not my area of speciality, but that's actually new to me. I've worked for a company and we do this daily, and obviously I'm not involved in telecoms on a daily basis, but that's news to me. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's news to some of our customers that they can do that, because rightly or wrong, but obviously wrongly, have assumed, as you put there, that Teams is kind of the new side of it.
Yeah.
And I would not have made the assumption that I could bring into my estate part of my old phone system and the older handsets and whatnot, and be able to call to them and have some level of functionality there. So I think if people can understand that we can do that you can mix environments and piecemeal approach almost to evolving systems, that will open people's eyes. You're absolutely right. I think that's going to be out of all the stuff we've talked about, cost savings, clearly everyone's interested in cost savings, but that functionality element and not having to rip and replace everything at once, I think that's really going to resonate. It's an interesting point.
It's a brilliant point.
Absolutely. So, like, I guess I know what time's like, and you and I can talk, so we'll go on forever. But anything else you can impart on our audience, just around, obviously, direct routing over Microsoft clearly sounds like it's a no-brainer, straightforward to set up. Any other benefits that can be delivered with direct routing that we should kind of air now that our audience would find a value?
Definitely, there are a whole host of different functions and benefits with regards to direct routing, and also other little bits and bobs that you can do through, whether it's direct routing or with Teams, that people aren't necessarily aware of. So, but for direct routing, one of the big things is always what happens to our old phone numbers. So it's really, really simple. It's obviously really important that somebody knows what they're doing ports those phone numbers for you, because a lot of organisations out there, they've had that phone number for 20 years, everyone's got it saved, everyone knows. You don't want to lose your phone numbers. So with the direct routing function, it's really, really simple. You can very easily not only port all the main numbers away, you can port all of your DDIs into direct routing, and you can also point all of those DDIs to individual users, and you can do all types of crazy things where you could say, if someone calls me from a Manchester phone number, route them to our Manchester office. If someone calls us from a London phone number, route them to our London office. If they call me at 5 p.m, do this. If they call me at 5 a.m, do that. And you can keep all of those numbers and route them in all different ways, shapes and forms. But not only that, you've also got the managerial and the reporting side of things. You can start looking at the way that you are handling calls, your productivity, and your call patterns and behaviours. What time do we get our most calls? So we can put more staff in or reduce staff depending on what time calls are coming in. And what are our people actually doing? How long does it take them to answer the phone? How long are people hanging on for? How long are they on hold for? What was the outcome of the call? And the old chestnut, the average handling time. How quickly do sales, pick up the phone? How quickly do the faults department fix something? So you've got all that side of it as well. And there's also the great advantage of it can be just a software-based solution, headset on. There's no need for any disruption and cost of hardware. That's a very attractive point regarding it. DR, look at disaster recovery. If something goes wrong, you and I, we can just get our laptops and go and sit in a coffee shop and start answering the phone.
What did we all do last March, John? We all picked up our laptops and went home. We've not. We worked absolutely fine in that time. So
but what would happen if we had a physical phone, and the IT department said, "Oh, take this physical phone home. Where's your study? Where's your desk?
Huge line on it.
Where's your router?" I'd have been a Cat5 cable running up the staircase. And the other thing with direct routing, this is a really important one I'm very passionate about, is you're getting support. What happens, it's your phones. If a laptop dies, a laptop dies will be all right. But if the phones go off, then you've switched off from the outside world. And you need to be able to go to your supplier and say, guys, I've got a fault, help. And having that peace of mind of that UK-based 24/7 support where they can help you if something happens. It's not, and I know, Sam, it's not, if it happens, it's when it happens. And
it's always when, John, always when.
Yeah, and the mark of a great company is not if something breaks, it's how quickly they fix it.
100%.
So those are just some of the benefits.
No, listen, that's fantastic. And, I've certainly learned some things on this podcast that's brilliant. I'm sure our audience will have as well. So thank you, John. It's been really interesting. So understanding the different features, benefits, and obviously it's obvious why people would move to Teams now from a traditional PBX based solution, and looking at session border controllers and so on. I can now understand how that we do that for customers. So really informative, really interesting. Thank you very much for joining us.
No problem. Great talking to you, Sam.
Brilliant.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us on this week's edition of Krome Cast. If there's anything you'd like us to cover in future episodes, then please do leave that in the comment section below. Like, comment, subscribe and share, and join us again for Krome Cast. Take care.